We're going to start talking about the vertical diet today. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We're going to blast through a lot of information. I'll leave some time at the end for some questions for you. Of course, a lot of you folks know who I am already. University of Oregon Exercise Science, IFBB Pro and World Record Powerlifter. Done over 200 seminars in 14 countries in all 50 states. And I've gained and lost probably well over 1,000 pounds throughout my 30 years of competing, and bulking up to 300 pounds to powerlift, and dieting down to single-digit body fat to compete as an IFBB pro in bodybuilding. And I learned a lot of lessons along the way, and I certainly have plenty of anecdotes and lots of testimonials from clients I've worked with. But I endeavored to make sure that this was science-based. So a number of years ago, I partnered with Dr. Damon McCune. He's a PhD, RDN. Exercise physiologist. He was director of nutrition at UNLV, and we spent hundreds of hours together making sure that we made all of the information in here was science-based. Full disclosure, I sell ebooks, both a vertical diet ebook and a career ebook and a host of others, and I own a meal prep company, a nationwide meal prep company for the vertical diet. The ebook we're going to talk about today, the information, the vertical diet, is well over 220 pages, and it's not just nutrition. You guys know I'm heavy on sleep, hydration, digestion, all the blood testing, of course, through Merrick Health. We've got blood pressure quick fix kit, blood sugar quick fix kit, and we get very specific. I'll make some specific recommendations today. I'm not going to be, I'm not, I understand there's lots of different ways to meet your goals, but we're going to try and give somebody information they can actually utilize today. And the book has a quick start guide and menus and supplements as well covered. So, and the nationwide meal prep for those people who can't or don't have the time or energy to cook their own meals. We, of course, can deliver meals. So let's talk a little bit about or introduce you to some of the athletes that we've already worked with over the years. You folks are probably familiar with a lot of these guys. I spent the better part of the last year trying to put some weight on John Jones to get him ready for his heavyweight title match, hopefully coming up against Ngannou here early next year. Now we're down in Arizona working with Henry Cejudo, who's going to actually compete for the title in the UFC come in March. So it's been an exciting adventure. We wear it as a badge of honor when we train great athletes, but the truth of the matter is they're the easiest people to train. They're the most genetically gifted, the most disciplined, and they're pretty hardworking as well. But most importantly, really, is kind of differentiating between health and fitness. They're not the same thing. And I've often said, if you want to be healthy, don't compete. Fitness is the ability to perform a particular duty or task. And the fitness level required to be a world's strongest man or a UFC fighter, or even a 14-year-old gymnast at the Olympics is not necessarily healthy. So we'll focus a lot on health today. A lot of what I did throughout my career and for my clients really is just mitigate damage that people were doing to themselves competitively. But as for the general population, health is really just the state of being free from illness or injury. And the vast majority of health benefits, 95% of which, can be realized simply from weight loss itself, irrespective of the diet. I talked about this on the Tom Bilyeu podcast, and Merrick Health posted it, and it had millions of views and thousands of comments. And people really just lost their minds over, but it is true. Here's the excerpt that they presented.
The McDonald's diet. The guy ate at McDonald's, had his students track everything. 1,850 calories a day. They measured everything that he ate, but everything he ate was off the McDonald's menu. Big Macs, French fries, ice cream, whatever fit. And he walked for 40 minutes a day. He lost 30 pounds. His blood pressure improved, his blood sugars improved, his cholesterol improved. All of those things improved simply from the weight loss itself. 95% of the health benefits that you'll realize are strictly from the weight loss itself, irrespective of the diet. All diets work when they're strictly adhered to, if you're in a caloric deficit. And they all work the same way. There's no all-you-can-eat diet. Whether you're keto, whether you're intermittent fasting, whether you're paleo, whether you're vertical, they all work for the same reason. You're in a calorie deficit.
So a lot of folks, they really took issue with that. And the fact of the matter is that is the biggest impact that you can have on your health, the most immediate and the most dramatic, both for you and your clients. If that's one of the challenges that you have, is just having a high BMI. Dr. Ids followed up and said something very similar to that effect shortly after that video went viral.
Losing weight in and of itself does nothing for your health.
This is simply incorrect. It is simply false to say weight loss does nothing in and of itself. For example, we know keto diets are low in fiber and grains with beneficial phytochemicals and high in saturated fat and cholesterol. Basically, all things that credible health professionals don't advise doing for your health. However, this meta-analysis of 14 studies found the keto diet improves glycemic and lipid markers in people with type 2 diabetes because of the weight loss it induces. The actual benefits of losing excess adipose tissue still exist beyond those lifestyle changes. As shown in this review of over 500 studies, using Mendelian randomization found obesity to be causal in stroke, heart disease, and pulmonary embolisms. So yes, making positive lifestyle change should be the focus, but losing the actual fat tissue also improves your health. Class dismissed.
You know, and that's why we're so proud of the fact that in addition to the athletes that we've trained, we've got testimonials from thousands of clients all over the world, and just folks who generally lost weight and feel great. Lots of testimonials from folks come pouring in all the time. Here's a 65-pound weight loss. Another one from Tim here. Big Dean lost 110 pounds. Over 80-pound weight loss here. Lots and lots of testimonials come in. We're proud of those. We're excited for these people, but it also results in things like improvement in diabetes and blood pressure, all the things that we were just mentioned. And more importantly, gives people more energy, just a better kind of outlook for themselves. So let's try and figure out what's the best diet. That's what everybody's always arguing about. And I think that Dr. Aaron Carroll summed it up best in this video. He's the Dean of Research at Indiana, and he runs a site called Healthcare Triage, which is a fantastic resource. Let's listen to what he has to say about what's the best diet.
So what's the best diet for you? There have been a lot of studies comparing named diets. So many that a bunch of researchers were recently able to conduct a meta-analysis of these studies. The authors of this meta-analysis reviewed the medical literature for any randomized controlled trials of obese or overweight adults. The researchers identified 20,835 potential studies. Low-carb diets included Atkins, South Beach, and the Zone diet. Moderate macronutrient diets included Biggest Loser, Jenny Craig, Nutrisystem, Volumetrics, and Weight Watchers. Low-fat diets included Ornish and Rosemary Conlon. At 1 year, the low-fat diets had a 50% chance of being best. The low-carb diets had a 48% chance of being best. They all worked, but to different degrees. At 12 months, though, the differences were not nearly as big. Here's that chart. The best performing diet was a generic low-fat diet. Atkins lost its top spot by quite a bit, and others like Jenny Craig and Weight Watchers pulled into the pack. Anyone hoping for a silver bullet should be totally disappointed. There isn't one. The one thing all of these diets have in common is that they involve calorie restriction in some way. Generally, when you eat fewer calories, you lose more weight. So here's the truth. The best diet for you is likely the one you're going to keep. If the idea of a low-carb diet appeals to you, go with that one. If low-fat foods appeal to you, go with that one. It really doesn't seem to matter that much. The good news is that almost all of them work. There's hope. You just need to find the one that works for you. And then you really, really need to stick to it for a long, long time.
All the research suggests the same. When you control for calories and protein, where you put fats and carbs is strictly a matter of personal preference. So the best diet's going to be the one you'll follow. Fortunately, there's many paths to the same destination. So you can choose whatever works best for you, whatever feels the least restrictive. I have clients that are keto. I have clients that fast. I've even trained vegan athletes for competition. And we have a chapter covering such in the book. And so I'm not too particular about which path you take. I just try and make sure I find the one that you can stick to that becomes a lifestyle and you can adhere long term. All the diets work the same way. They work as a result of the calorie deficit. It's got to find a way to get there and stay there, and that it feels the least restrictive to you. Fortunately, losing weight is actually pretty easy. Most people that go on diets lose weight. Keeping it off is the hard part. We'll talk a lot about that today. 50 to 95% of people gain it back within 1 to 3 years. And here's the 3 main reasons that people fall off of diets. One, they just simply have no plan, but mostly because they get hungry and they get tired. And we'll talk about how to mitigate that today. The Weight Control Registry has studied successful dieters. It's the largest study, and they've studied over 10,000 participants with an average weight loss of 66 pounds who kept it off for more than 5 years. What did they do? Success leaves clues. 98% of these people modified their food intake. They went on a diet. They had a plan. Any diet, many different diets, they all seem to work for these folks. Number 2, 94% increased their physical activity. The number 1 form of activity was simply walking. And 78% ate breakfast every day. And I simply threw that in there because whether you do or you don't is a matter of personal preference. Don't think that skipping breakfast is going to improve your potential for diet outcome. My daughter doesn't eat breakfast. My son eats breakfast. I don't care. It's personal preference, whatever you can comply with. And then number 4 is 75% weigh themselves regularly. That which gets measured gets improved. So you want to track it so you can hold yourself accountable and have some sort of metric for progress. So we'll talk more specifically about the vertical diet today. This is my 5 simple, sensible, and sustainable steps that I introduce to all of my clients. And number 1 is compliance. You guys have heard me talk about compliance is the science. All diets work when they're strictly adhered to. How do I help people comply? Well, this has been studied quite extensively, the behavioral weight management programs, and they've concluded that there's a few primary things that people do that lead to the greatest success. And the number 1, more so than all the others combined, was meal prepping. Whether you prep or you use a prep company, this is something that bodybuilder, figure, physique, bikini competitors have been doing for 50 years. You see them walk around with their Tupperwares and their 6-pack bags. This is the main reason they're successful. They prep all their meals ahead of time. They know exactly what they're going to eat, when they're going to eat, and it's portioned exactly to the size that they need. I've traveled all over the world, as mentioned. I've been, in 14 countries in all 50 states. And many times when I travel, I'll have to take my meals with me. I just throw a bunch of prep meals into a rolling Coleman cooler, and I throw it on the plane. And when I land, I stay at a hotel with a place like Airbnb with a microwave and a fridge, and I eat all of the meals that I take with me, so I don't have to go off of my program, and I have what I want when I want. I don't do Tupperware anymore. I do these thermos. They're $20 on Amazon. These are life-changing, and I don't make any money saying that, but I'll pack these into the airplane. I send my kids to school with a hot lunch with these things. They've been very convenient. Number 2 is creating a checklist and sticking to it. I have all my clients send me this information daily, not a weekly check-in, daily. They send me their morning body weight, their hours of sleep, pictures of each meal that they eat, and I have them track their 10-minute walks and when they train and what body part they train. And I put my checklist just on a piece of paper. I haven't found any apps that really impress me. And so I just make a spreadsheet and print it out, and I have it sitting there staring at me, and I can easily look at it and see if my sleep is not sufficient, or how my weight and everything is affected by my program. Number 3 is coaching, and this is huge. It's a lot more effective than visiting clinicians or registered dietitians because coaches are with you, more often. They communicate with you regularly. Same thing could be true of a good training partner or even a spouse that's involved in helping you with the program. Next up on my simple, sensible, and sustainable steps is blood work, and you guys are all familiar with this. Of course, on my website, I've got a link to blood work, but we all here work with Merrick Health. They've been a godsend. We do a very comprehensive panel for our clients, which you've all most certainly had done, and you're familiar with these and how much they can tell you. It's great to have these metrics and then to make changes in your program and then subsequently be able to see if you actually got the results that you wanted. Next up is sleep. I'm huge on sleep. Here's Joe Rogan talking to Dr. Matthew Walker about the importance of sleep.
Wow. Practice does not make perfect. Practice with a night of sleep
is what makes perfect, because you come back the next day and you're 20 to 30% better in terms of your skilled performance than where you were at the end of your practice session the day before. Sleep is the greatest legal performance enhancing drug. If you're getting 6 hours of sleep or less, your time to physical exhaustion drops by up to 30%. So you could spend all of your time training for a 10-round fight, perfect condition, but then I put you on 6 hours of sleep the night before, you're now going to be physically exhausted by round 7 rather than round 10. Your peak muscle strength, your physical vertical jump height, and your peak running speed, all of those things correlate with sleep. The less that you have, the worse those outcomes are. And it's a perfect linear relationship. The less sleep that you have, higher your injury risk.
Sleep loss also limits fat loss.
You used to think that there were kind of 3 pillars in the human body: diet, exercise, and sleep. And now you've pretty much said it's all superseded by sleep.
I think sleep is actually the foundation on which those 2 other things sit. So for example, if you're dieting, you're trying to watch what you eat, but you're not getting sufficient sleep, 70% of the weight that you will lose will come from lean muscle mass, and you will keep all of the fat. The body actually becomes stingy in giving up its fat when you are underslept.
It's the first thing and the most effective thing that I cover with all of my clients. More sleep increases testosterone and growth hormone, improves blood circulation, decreases blood pressure significantly. And less sleep, of course, will slow your metabolism, decrease testosterone, slow your thyroid, increase your stress and hunger and cortisol, and promotes insulin resistance. A lot of my clients, especially my heavy clients, the powerlifters, the bodybuilders, folks with the extra mass around their neck, may suffer from sleep apnea, snoring and waking up tired. It increases fatigue and DOMS and brain fog, increases blood pressure and sore throats and headaches and gastric reflux and ED, increases blood thickness, causes sodium loss, and it's just a greater heart attack risk, and a lot suffer from depression. So first thing I do is try and get them to get diagnosed, possibly by a doctor. If they can't do that, they can use a stop bang questionnaire on the internet. And if they are snoring and waking up tired, they may need a CPAP. These are life-changing. I don't make any money saying that. I've had many, many clients. I was shocked to find out that Hafthor Bjornsson and Brian Shaw and Dan Green, even Lane Johnson on the Eagles, well over 300 pounds, weren't using CPAPs. It's amazing. And these are almost an immediate fix. The next morning you wake up and you've got all this energy. And so I refer people to their doctor. If they're unable to get a CPAP from their doctor, then we'll try and get them something on Craigslist or use a reseller. Good sleep hygiene. This is important. Wake up at the same time every morning. Get exposed to sunlight. Sleep in a cool, quiet, and dark room. Try and avoid blue light 2 hours before bed. A warm shower seems to cool the core and help with sleep. Meditation, deep breathing right before bed. A worry journal, just writing down some notes for the day, things you're stressed about, to-do list, etc. Naps are okay if they're brief and early in the day, and try and avoid caffeine and too much fluid at night. These are all things that are free, things that we tend to not do because we're burning the candle at both ends, or we stay up late sifting through our social media. It's really kind of hard to put that down and to be committed to get a good night's sleep. I actually set an alarm to go to sleep. And that way I know to shut my phone off at 9 p.m. when I put the kids to bed at the very latest, and just not look at these screens anymore, and de-stress and get ready for bed. Next up is eating. Let's talk about diet. The most important things, the calorie equation, of course. The calories are king. Next up would be your macronutrients. As I said earlier, protein being the most important of those. And then food composition is a much smaller portion. Nutrient timing may have some benefits for a particular population, athletes in particular. And then supplementation is a very small portion of your program. And here's how fat is burned, or calories are burned by the body. Your basal metabolic rate burns most of your calories. Then your non-exercise activity, that's just walking around throughout the day. That's why everybody likes to talk about getting 8,000, 10,000 steps if you can, and just staying active, staying on your feet. Thermic effect of food is the calories that are burned from eating, the highest of which is protein. And then EAT, exercise activity thermogenesis. That's that skinny little sliver in yellow. That's the actual cardio that you're doing to burn calories. You could see it's a very small portion of the total pie. It's not something I focus on for weight loss. It's something I focus on for general health, of course. Because more exercise does not equal more fat loss. And here's Dr. Aaron Carroll again to talk about that.
Last week I talked about the many ways exercise is awesome. This week I want to focus on one way it's not: weight loss. Sorry, but that's the topic of this week's Healthcare Triage. A 2011 meta-analysis looked at the relationship between physical activity and fat mass in children and found that being active is probably not the key determinant in whether a child is at an unhealthy weight. In the adult population, interventional studies have difficulty showing that a physically active person is less likely to gain excess weight than a sedentary person. Moreover, exercise increases one's appetite. After all, when you burn off calories being active, your body will often signal to you to replace them. Research confirms this. A 2012 systematic review of studies that looked at how people complied with exercise programs showed that over time, people wound up burning less energy with exercise than predicted and also increasing their caloric intake. When you lose weight, metabolism often slows. Many people believe that exercise can counter or even reverse that trend. Research, however, shows that the resting metabolic rate in all dieters slows significantly, regardless of whether they exercise. A 1999 review identified 3 key meta-analyses and other randomized controlled trials that found statistically significant, but overall small, increases in weight loss with exercise. Over a 6-month period, though, adding exercise made no difference. Another systematic review from last fall found similar results, with diet plus exercise performing better than diet alone, but without much of an absolute difference. All of these interventions included dietary changes, and the added weight loss benefit from activity was small. If they would spend just half the time they do exercising trying to make a difference in the kitchen, they'd most likely see much better results. Exercise has a big upside for health beyond potential weight loss. But that huge upside doesn't seem to apply necessarily to weight loss. The data just don't support it. Unfortunately, exercise seems to excite us much more than eating right does. After all, as Sarah Green said to me when I was writing my column on this topic, The Biggest Loser would be a really boring show if it were shot after shot of contestants just not overeating.
And that certainly rings true. So the first thing we do with clients is we have them calculate the number of calories that they need to eat in order to lose weight, if that's their goal. And you can just use a BMR calculator that's on the internet. We have one in the Vertical Diet. And this is an estimate. You can use a weekly food log if you'd like to try and estimate your calories also. But once you actually get an estimate and you try and meet that number, you have to kind of carefully track everything, at least initially, to make sure that your calories are in line with what your BMR calculation gave you. And then next up, we select macros. And you can do this in 30 seconds with a 3x5 card or on the back of a napkin. It's pretty easy. Just proteins, fats, and carbs. I told you I'd be specific. There is definitely some room for individuals to have their own personal preference, but I'll tell you why we do what we do. First and foremost, we calculate the protein. And I put that at about 1 gram of protein per pound of lean weight or goal weight. So if you weigh 180 and you want to weigh 150, then get 150 grams of protein a day. And we fix that number. It's not a percentage of total calories. It's based on your body mass, your lean mass. And so there's 150 grams of protein. We do fats at about a little less than half of that, about 0.4 grams per pound. And so you can see there we put in about 60 grams of fats. Now carbs are the rest. And that's based on that first calculation from your BMR calculator. And so if it told you to eat 1,600, 1,700 calories a day, you put your proteins and fats in there based on your body, your lean mass, and then the carbs are the rest. And that's supposed to fuel your workload for the day. Let's do one for a 200-pound person or a person who wants a lean weight of 200 pounds. And their protein intake would be 200 grams, and their fats would be about 0.4 grams per pound. And then carbs are the rest. This 200-pound individual is relatively sedentary. They're going to try and diet on 2,230 calories. Now, when I get an active individual, could be somebody who works hard all day or somebody who's an athlete, that same 200-pound person might burn 3,500 calories a day, in which case the proteins and fats are the same and the carbs are increased to fuel the extra workload. So that's how we at least initially start the program. It's what we recommend. And the reason I keep the carbs in there, particularly for people with a high workload, is because they're beneficial for performance. And we can get lots of valuable micronutrients out of those as well, lots of fruits and vegetables. So protein, this is by Jorn Tomlin. Well, first here was a study on high protein diets being more effective in improving insulin resistance and glycemic variability compared to a Mediterranean diet. And that's simply because the Mediterranean diet's around 18% protein, and the high protein diet is around 30% protein. And protein has a higher thermic effect of food. It also tends to blunt the glycemic response to meals. And of course, it's more satiating. So there is a benefit to having a higher protein diet, and it helps retain lean mass as well better than a lower protein diet. This is Jordan Tomlin's research, PhD, and he has recommended a gram of protein per pound of body weight or lean weight. And then getting about 20 to 40 grams per meal helps maximize muscle protein synthesis. Older athletes may need more. It's a good idea to get a decent amount of protein at night. And then both Jorn and the International Society of Sports Nutrition recognize that there's no mechanism to store protein in the body. And so they like to see evenly spaced feedings. 3 a day would be plenty. You could do 2 a day and probably be just fine. But if you need to get 200 grams of protein, that's going to be hard in 2 meals. And so they want it spaced out kind of evenly throughout the day, as many as 4 for athletes, but 3 would be fine for the average goals. Leucine is an important component. Animal proteins have a higher leucine content. You have to breach a certain threshold, which is why they're recommending 20 to 40 grams of protein per meal, which is why I'm not a big fan of snacks, because it doesn't actually reach that threshold for muscle protein synthesis, because there's generally not enough leucine in the protein content of, say, a protein bar. Not critical, but it's just my initial recommendation. And then eating too often, there's a refractory period that doesn't allow you to continue to stimulate muscle protein synthesis if you're eating every 2 hours. That's totally unnecessary. Next up, the protein sources. We generally select lean sources from lean red meat, like top sirloin or 96.4 beef, whole eggs mixed with egg whites to keep the fats down, but get all the protein in. Dairy is a fantastic source of protein. I know a lot of people have demonized dairy over the years, but it seems that there's significant evidence that it's great for health, actually reduces cardiovascular disease, does not raise LDL cholesterol, even whole milk. Salmon and tuna is on there, obviously, chicken, turkey. So just a whole host of different, variety of lean protein sources that we recommend in the diet. I do like the red meats, the ruminant animals, the cow, sheep, bison, and deer. They have a 4-chambered stomach, and they ferment cellulose fiber into a very nutrient dense source of food for you. I'm just cautious with the really fatty cuts, and then of course all the things that go on top of them if they're cooked in oil, or if somebody puts a big wad of butter on top of them, that can be problematic. But a lean steak like a top sirloin is generally only about 1/3 saturated fat for total fats, and we're only recommending about 1/3 total fats in the diet. So you'd be under 9% of total saturated fat in the diet, which is well within the guidelines of the AHA. Red meats are higher in iron, higher in B12, higher in B6, loaded with creatine, potassium, of course, 100 milligrams per ounce, selenium, zinc, carnosine, choline, glutamine. Fatty fish at least twice a week for the omega-3s, the vitamin A and the iodine. So we try and get salmon in there, or tuna if we can. I think the fats are mostly in the whole food lean protein sources. You can get them in your steak, you can get them in your chicken, get them in your eggs, get them in your dairy. You don't necessarily need to add a bunch of oils, unless just a little bit to cook with, or some olive oil for maybe a salad could be beneficial. They're all in these great, highly micronutrient dense, high protein sources of foods. Your fats are right there along with them. How about cholesterol? I get a lot of questions about that. Cholesterol in the diet is no longer a nutrient of concern. That's the US dietary guidelines. Cholesterol that you eat doesn't necessarily, for the vast majority of people, impact blood lipids, LDL. And the next up is carbohydrates. The carb sources that I utilize, or generally I start with, this is my son, Stanley Jr. Hi, welcome back from school. The carbs I usually start with are fruits and vegetables, and mostly because they're high in potassium. The potatoes is a big one for me because it's really high in potassium. It's got resistant starch. It's also very satiating. It's one of the highest foods on the satiety list, which we measure how long people stay full based on certain foods that they eat. and then a host of other, carrots, spinach, peppers, cucumber, squash, zucchini, all high in potassium. It's kind of the foundation of the diet, is to get carbohydrates that are rich in potassium, as are fruits. Love the fruits, oranges, strawberries, raspberries. There's a lot of great literature going on right now about polyphenols. And oranges are very satiating. A pound of strawberries is like 120 calories if you could even eat that much in a sitting. They're just not very calorie dense. They're loaded with fiber, loaded with water, and they're very satiating. Next up, or part of that, is really I focus on vitamins and minerals and micronutrients, which a lot of those foods that we just mentioned, the lean protein sources from a variety of different foods, and then all those vegetables and fruits will provide you all of these vitamins and minerals. There's a few key ones that I like to discuss. One of them is iodine. Hypothyroidism is quite common with women in particular, slowing the metabolism, raising blood pressure, raising cholesterol, causing goiter and impairing digestion. All of these things are, Merrick sees very commonly in women. It's one of the most prescribed medications is thyroid medication. And that often happens with a lack of iodine in the diet. Chris Masterjohn talks about this here. Listen to all the symptoms related to low thyroid.
Things that could be making you iodine deficient. Iodized salt was the public health campaign that eradicated severe iodine deficiency. A lot of people restrict their salt intake. If you do, you could be eliminating one of your key sources of iodine. You may have switched from iodized salt to something like Celtic sea salt or pink Himalayan salt, but they're not good sources of iodine. You could have increased your intake of foods that have compounds that inhibit the uptake of iodine into your thyroid gland. The most common example of this is large amounts of cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and kale and cauliflower. If your cholesterol is running high, or if you feel fatigued, or you feel brain fog, or your hair is falling out, or you're getting puffy underneath the eyes, or cold hands and feet, it could be symptoms of hypothyroidism. And so if those are happening, you need more iodine in your diet.
So I usually recommend a cranberry juice, just a couple of ounces a day, maybe a little more for larger individuals, but that helps satisfy your iodine needs. And iodine's not a solution for things like Hashimoto's, et cetera. I'm just suggesting that get iodine in your diet. It has a lot of benefits. Potassium's the next big one. We kind of talked about that with food, with fruits and vegetables. Lowers blood pressure, decreases stroke risk, helps regulate your heartbeat, decreases blood sugars and sugar cravings, and it really helps with constipation. It's hard to get 4,700 milligrams of potassium a day. You have to be deliberate about it. Here's how I do it. I get a potato every day. I can throw some spinach in. I have the spinach OJ yogurt shake that's just delicious that I talk about all the time, but it's really just a potassium shake. And then, of course, your meats, your salmon and all the meats that you eat, chicken, those all have about 100 milligrams of potassium per ounce. So that's what gets you north of 4,700 milligrams a day. Magnesium is hard to get from food. We do supplement that and recommend such, particularly for athletes. And vitamin D, we do recommend supplementing that around 2,000 IUs a day. Highly beneficial for increasing calcium absorption and with sleep and insulin sensitivity. Water, we reach out to Dr. Sandra Godek at the Heat Institute. She's a PhD specializing in thermoregulation, hydration, and electrolyte replacement. I get sweat tests for all my athletes, and she could see with their salty sweaters. Lane Johnson sweats out 5 grams of sodium an hour. And so she designs a protocol for rehydration. And she likes to talk about the fact that low performance is low electrolytes, not just water. She makes sure that there's adequate sodium and carbohydrates in their rehydration drinks. But being dehydrated will cause headaches, insomnia, brain fog. I have clients that get dizzy when they stand up from a seated position. And sometimes it's just because they're low in electrolytes and they need sufficient sodium and potassium in order to perform well. We also cover digestive disorders. Some people suffer from IBS and Crohn's and a host of other digestive distress, just uncomfortable gas and bloating, all of those things. And when that happens, most professionals in clinical nutritionists or gastroenterologists who haven't diagnosed a more serious condition will recommend an elimination diet. And the most studied elimination diet's the low FODMAP diet. It's out of Monash University in Australia. And these are fermentable oligo-di monosaccharides and polyols. And we sometimes need to implement this diet with people, at least initially, to get through the symptoms and start reintroducing slowly. It is individualistic, it's dose dependent, and how the foods are prepared matter. And it's cumulative in nature. Things like sugar alcohols, you might be able to handle a little bit, but you get too many of them and it can cause diarrhea. Here's some foods that qualify as low FODMAP as compared to higher FODMAP foods. You can Google a list for more details to look through in great, at a later time. But these are just foods that are less likely or more likely to cause significant gas and bloating and aggravate IBS symptoms. And so we may introduce these to some of our clients with those symptoms. The list is large. There's over 100 items in the green that qualify as low FODMAP. And so it's not as though it's too restrictive. It is selective, however. I talk a lot about the guru diet as compared to the vertical diet is intended to be more inclusive than what I've experienced throughout my career, especially with bodybuilding, figure, physique, and bikini competitors. Most people who go to a nutritionist, you get the egg white fish, broccoli diet with a dollop of peanut butter. Very common, not very enjoyable, not terribly sustainable. And I would suggest that it's deficient in sufficient micronutrients. And so I do include more whole foods and more variety of foods. I don't demonize eggs. I don't demonize red meat. I don't demonize dairy. It's important for calcium. I don't demonize salt, particularly for people that are eating a whole food diet and exercising regularly. And fruits. I don't demonize fruits. And so I like to keep a more diverse variety of higher nutrient dense foods. This becomes particularly important for women. The female triad rears its ugly head with athletes and of course, physique, figure, and bikini competitors, but I worked with track athletes at the University of Oregon as far back as the early 90s. And I saw the distance runners in particular suffering from this female triad using, energy restricted diets and suffering from amenorrhea, which is a cessation of the menstrual period, and osteoporosis or osteopenia. We would commonly see shin splints in the distance runners. And anemia, a low iron, hypothyroidism is mentioned, hair loss, those kinds of things. Now, to try and remedy these problems, obviously, we'd like to get a more diverse diet and not have them be so restrictive. But raising iron in women, and this just happened a few weeks ago when I was in Arizona working with a female softball team. A couple of the girls had experienced a decrease in performance, and so we got blood tests for them and found out, in fact, they were low in iron. And so to increase iron, we have them consume a heme iron source, usually from red meat, with a non-heme iron source, spinach or a host of other vegetables, and vitamin C. When you put those three together, you get a more absorbable form of iron. And that particular meal, we avoid dairy, because dairy will prevent the uptake of iron. And for men who need to lower their iron, sometimes they have to donate blood. And sometimes I just have them consume a lot of dairy with their meals, and that, in fact, will help maintain normal iron status. Metabolic syndrome, this one's a nasty one for a lot of my big athletes. This is Mark Bell at 300 pounds. An increase in blood sugar, blood pressure, cholesterol, fatty liver. I experienced this myself throughout my career, and certainly with a lot of my big athletes. And so, when I was working with Lane Johnson, he gained over 30 pounds and reduced his blood pressure because we use a lot of, we intervene to make sure we're mitigating some of these health problems. And one of the biggest things we focus on first and foremost is high blood pressure. Obviously, no smoking or alcohol. Again, losing weight has probably the hugest impact on blood pressure. Sleep apnea, getting a CPAP can lower your blood pressure by up to 20 points. Taking walks after meals, hypothyroidism increases blood pressure. We have a whole list of things here, including increasing your potassium and your magnesium and your calcium intake. All of these things dramatically improve blood pressure, and we were able to do this with Lane even gaining weight, lowered his blood pressure significantly. High blood sugars is another big concern, obviously. Losing weight has the hugest impact. A 7% weight loss can resolve 95% of fatty liver, and a 15% weight loss may restore beta cell function in the pancreas. And so actually the most effective diet had the quickest weight loss, which was a low-calorie liquid diet, and it reversed type 2 diabetes within 7 to 10 days. It's pretty extraordinary, but maintaining it long-term is obviously a concern. And so these are a lot of methods that we use for high blood sugars. Liver issues, we get these with athletes as well. And, again, weight loss is probably the biggest impact. I won't dwell on this. And then cholesterol. Generally, genetics is the driving force for that, but obesity and lack of exercise and increased saturated fat are the things that we address first and foremost. The biggest impact can be losing weight, reducing saturated fats, and increasing monounsaturated and omega-3s, and increasing soluble fiber. And thyroid has a huge impact. If your TSH is over 2, then you want to get that remedied before you start mucking around with your lipids, because that'll definitely help with cholesterol clearance. So these things are things that we focus on with the diet and things that we adhere to. Acid reflux is a big problem, and we try and eliminate antacids right away. It impairs protein breakdown and mineral absorption. And so we start possibly with a low FODMAP diet, and the rest of it's just behavioral, chewing your food very well, eating smaller meals, eating your protein first, reducing fluids with meals, taking 10-minute walks, try not to lay down after meals. These are all things that we do to intervene. We've gotten many, many clients off of antacids as a result of this intervention. And then things that make you weak. We get a lot of people that take antacids, of course, as just mentioned, but anti-estrogens, be very cautious. You know, you should have a definite need for those, for some people who respond poorly to TRT treatment. Metformin is kind of a mixed bag. It actually can impair hypertrophy from training and cardiovascular from training. And so it's only recommended kind of in the most severe circumstances for people with diabetes. But as you start to lose weight and want to improve your performance, I think metformin is another thing that we're very cautious about. NSAIDs, statins, nowadays with the mixed therapies, the lower dose statins with the PCSK9 inhibitors, we see a lot less problems with myalgia. Antibiotics, of course, impairs digestion. Icing immediately following workout impairs hypertrophy. Donating blood too often. We see people get their ferritin down below 100, certainly below 70 is going to cause a lot of fatigue. And so be cautious with that. I do have some case studies. This is Stephanie Sanzo, a popular influencer out of Australia. And she came to me, she was on like 1,200 calories a day. She was doing 4 a.m. cardio. She was deficient in B12 and iron, had no iodine or sodium. She was avoiding salt completely. And she suffered from water retention, did a ton of cardio, was tired all the time, fatigued. And after just a short period of time, she said 2-month project, her energy improved significantly. Her body composition felt better. We got her up to 1,850 calories over a 2-month period. All she did for cardio was 3 10-minute walks a day. We mostly had her lift. She loved to do heavy lifting. And so we just did the weight training. This is Nadia Wyatt, 3rd place in the IFBB Pro Miss Olympia. She used to prep on chicken, fish, and broccoli, the old guru diets, and she was tired all the time. Now she preps on steak and potatoes and fruit. Huge difference in size and strength. She said down here that she also had significant digestion problems, and it improved a lot from getting a more diverse, more nutrient-dense foods that we used. In preparation for this show, here she is, 3rd place in Miss Olympia. She did 3 10-minute walks a day. That's all the cardio she did. We did do 2 a day weight training. She'd go in the morning, do quads, come back at night, and do hamstrings. But there were brief workouts, 35 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night. But just the frequency and the volume, we really like the weight training better than excessive cardio because we want to hold on to muscle tissue. This is my wife, even in my own house. She used to be a cardio bunny and eat the guru diet. And here's her transformation after starting to crush weights and eating steak every day. And notice the weight, 180 to 178. The scale doesn't tell the whole story. You have to get waist measurements and body composition pictures so that you can and do check-ins with pictures so you can see the transformation because you don't see it yourself. Hafthor Bjornsson and Tiny are both clients of mine. Obviously, Hafthor is huge for weight gain, but Tiny was 103 pounds, had a diet down to 103. We use different strategies with these folks, and here they are. On the left, most importantly, probably is the weight loss strategy, and we use meal prepping with them, of course. We have them increase their protein. It satiates them better and may hold on to lean mass in a calorie deficit. She definitely ate steak every day. She used the high satiety foods, like I mentioned. Potatoes and oranges are at the top of the list, boiled potatoes, and she ate those every day, and it really helped kind of keep her from having cravings. Increased her fiber intake. Drinking waters right before a meal kind of helps fill the stomach up and eat so you feel more satiated at that meal. And of course, the 10-minute walks. And we did provide some low-calorie snacks. I kind of like biltong, which is like a really low-fat jerky. And then fat-free Greek yogurt with some blueberries and strawberries, things that she could go to when she was having trouble with eating. The gain weight side, I'll skip over that, but I have a whole 14 tips for gaining weight video on YouTube if you ever like to dig into that. We do have a quick start guide where you calculate your daily calories and then select the menu that here's the daily calorie calculator. And here's the menu plans. I have them from 1,500 calories all the way up to 3,500 calories. And then you simply print out a grocery shopping list that I have in the book. And I also have a tracker, a daily tracker in there, so people can get started in just 5 minutes. Last is the training. I won't go too deep into this. Needless to say, after everything we've discussed, losing fat happens in the kitchen. Building muscle it happens from lifting weights. And your heart and lungs is simply your exercise, which can be achieved with your brisk 10-minute walk and maybe an occasional enjoyable cardio thing that you like to do. There's very specific guidelines for training for hypertrophy, and this covers all of them. This is really comprehensive. This is something that you might want to screenshot or save. This is your checklist. It goes down frequency, volume, effort, load, exercise selection and order, your tempo, rest periods. The only thing that's not on here is probably range of motion. A greater range of motion is going to result in greater hypertrophy. But I have that in the book as well. I'll talk briefly about pain. A lot of people experience pain, back pain, knee pain, shoulder pain. And this is not an indictment on chiropractics or physical therapists. I've utilized both of them. They're very knowledgeable and helpful. But just generally speaking, what can you do? Greg Nuckols talks about it here in Stronger by Science.
Low back pain, or really any type of pain, generally it tends to improve over time. That would include stuff like manual therapy or chiropractic, which a lot of people do go towards for treatment of low back pain. Those things weren't nearly as effective as any kind of exercise, because a lot of times when people are in pain, they develop kinesiophobia, like they just stop moving. Stuff like manual therapy and chiropractic, maybe it's better than nothing, but that's not much of an endorsement. The effect sizes there just massively paled in comparison to any type of exercise.
Have to keep moving. I move a lot every day. It's one of the biggest things I've had to do as I've aged, is actually move more. That's why I like the 10-minute walks, because I do them frequently throughout the day. They increase insulin sensitivity, decrease gas, improve digestion and satiety, and they aid in recovery. 3 10-minute walks a day is better than a 30-minute bout of exercise at the end of the day. They've studied this on sedentary office workers versus people who are up and on their feet moving around. Briefly, we'll go over some myths in the industry. This will get us almost to the end. This is from examine.com. This isn't me. This is 14 PhDs working for examine.com, and they go to deep dive into each of these. But all of these myths, like protein's bad for you. Nope. Carbs are bad. Nope. Fats are bad. Nope. Egg yolks are bad. Nope. Red meat's bad. Nope. Salt is bad. Bread is not bad. High fructose corn syrup is no different than sugar. Many studies have been done on that. Dietary supplements are necessary. No, they're convenient and they taste good. Food nutrients are superior to supplemental nutrients. In fact, we don't have any evidence to suggest that. Fresh is more nutritious is not true. Frozen is fine. Food labeled natural is healthier, and that's not true either. You should eat clean, whatever that is. I'm not really sure. We might want to reduce, certainly should reduce fast foods, ultra palatable, hyper palatable, ultra processed foods, mainly because we're inclined to eat more of them. And that's kind of the real problem with the obesity epidemic, is that we're just increasing more calories. You should detox. That is not true. If you have a liver and kidneys, you have detox. You don't need to drink some shake unless you enjoy diarrhea. Eating often will boost your metabolism. Not true. 2 meals a day or 6 meals a day, if you control for calories or protein, you get the same outcome. You shouldn't skip breakfast. We discussed that earlier. That's also not true. To lose fat, don't eat before bed. That's not true. It's the total calories for the day, not when you eat them. Doing cardio on an empty stomach isn't any more effective than doing fed cardio. Need protein right after a workout is also not true. And then creatine will increase testosterone, or increase your testosterone but cause hair loss and kidney damage. Also not true. Well, that wraps up the vertical diet, guys. I really appreciate you tuning in. I think we've got some room here for questions if Memo wants to let me know what you got.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Stan. That was a great presentation. I took notes personally. I hope everyone else did too. We're going to be sending out a recording so you guys can watch this back. There's quite a few questions. I'm going to go through these rapid fire. Our first question is a simple one. Outside of allergies, are there any specific foods someone should avoid?
No, there really isn't. If you're not allergic to it, there's a difference between allergy and a sensitivity. Understanding this is kind of the problem with lactose. If you're allergic to it, you shouldn't eat it. But sensitivity, it's dose dependent. And so you can, and if you don't eat, if you don't consume dairy for a while, your lactase enzyme will downregulate, which will make you more sensitive. And so you might have to titrate smaller doses over a period of time in order to upregulate your lactase enzyme. That's just a specific example, but generally speaking, it's the dietary pattern itself. It's not a specific food that you're trying to avoid. Get sufficient protein, get a broad range of micronutrient dense foods, as mentioned with the protein recommendations, and the fruits and vegetables, and you should be good to go.
What are your thoughts on GLP-1 agonist medications?
You know, I'd refer to you guys on that. I haven't personally taken them, and I do see a lot of good research as to the benefits of those. But I think there's a decent, substantial amount of research suggests they can be very beneficial for people with appetite issues.
We have a client here who's lost 50 pounds over the last 12 months. Congratulations. But he's now interested in starting to maybe gain some muscle back, and he's worried about gaining excess fat going into a calorie surplus. So do you have any advice for him in terms of maybe how many calories he should be eating over his maintenance on a day-to-day basis?
I don't think you would need more than, say, 300 calorie surplus if you want to be really cautious about not gaining too much fat with the muscle. Obviously, you'll gain a little bit of fat with the muscle. It's the same thing with weight loss. You want to try and maintain as much muscle as possible while losing fat. Same things with weight gain. And, you know, it's not as though you have to make a single decision. We fluctuate these with our clients. Even with Hafthor Bjornsson, I brought him down from 440 to 395 to try and remedy a lot of his medical, his problems with fatty liver and insulin resistance and high blood pressure. But then we took him back up to compete. And so we do like to periodize people's weight. So don't be afraid to go all out, get a small surplus, gain as much muscle as you think you can. And then if you feel like you're getting too heavy, then gradually reduce the calories. Big surpluses and big deficits will be too drastic. You'll gain too much fat or lose too much muscle. So stay close to the middle and take your time and be patient.
What body fat percentage is ideal for health, hormones, and performance? And remember too, we have males and females joining us. If you could give a body fat percentage specific for males and females, I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I think with men, I think we're talking anything between 15 and 20%, and women usually are 5% over that, 20 to 25%. There are some BMI measurements. You want to couple that with a waist measurement and make sure that, like for men in particular, that you keep your BMI under 30 and keep your waist under 40. That generally tends to impart the greatest health outcomes.
What adjustments should a client make in their training when going into a caloric deficit?
I'm kind of torn here, because in a caloric deficit, you may lose muscle unless the stimulus, the training stimulus, is sufficient. There's been plenty of research shown that even at a significant deficit, you can maintain your muscle tissue if the training stimulus is sufficient, the intensity. Where you may have a problem is with volume. You may get tired and not be able to do as many sets and reps or train as long as you did before, because you might be mostly, beyond calorie, but also maybe carbohydrates restricted. It's okay. Just front load most of your high intensity. You may train, say, for 20 minutes instead of 30, or 30 instead of 40, but the intensity should be high, meaning if you lose strength, it's probably a pretty good indicator that you're losing muscle. And so keep your intensity high, meaning your rate of perceived exertion. Get within a rep or two of failure is what I should say. A lot of people used to, when they go on diets, they used to start training higher reps. They do sets of 20 or 30 and not get anywhere near failure. And that would result in significant muscle loss. So try and stay close to that 1 or 2 reps to failure. And at least, I would say, 5 or 6 sets twice a week per body part would be able to hold on to the muscle tissue.
Great. We have a client here with chronically elevated sex hormone binding globulin levels, SHBG. Any recommendations as to dietary recommendations to lower his SHBG levels?
Carbohydrates seem to actually help with that. Some people see an increase in SHBG when they go into a keto diet. They also see a little elevated fasted glucose in the morning and a little fasted cortisol. They have little sleep issues, and sometimes I don't know if they're going low carb, but sometimes I would say fruit could be sufficient, and you wouldn't feel as though you were overeating. But that's one. A lot of people talk about boron, but I just haven't seen enough long-term research to show that it's going to be effective for the vast majority of people. So that would be my biggest suggestion.
Last question here. We have a client who is a big fan of your 10-minute walks, and he found them difficult when he first got started, and he's finding them easier and easier. He's wondering if he should maybe start jogging or running.
Sure. I mean, we see a linear improvement in health outcomes with increased VO2 max. And you're going to increase your VO2 max if you challenge yourself to, a higher heart rate and a more extended period of cardiovascular fitness. But I'd also say this: the biggest difference in health impact happens from sedentary to meeting sufficient, which is, I think, 120 or 150 minutes a week of moderate cardiovascular activity. Above that, it's smaller and smaller. I mean, it's asymptotic, I guess I should say. It's not as though you just keep getting these massive health outcome improvements. And then I start looking at kind of a cost benefit ratio. At what sacrifice? If I'm going to do more cardio, what am I doing less of as a result? Because you've got limited physical capital and you've got limited time in a day with your family and your job. And I want to get the biggest return on investment. So, maybe I would do a little more intensity, but I would always share the load with the weight training. I would just make sure that one doesn't suffer as a result of the other.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stan. I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge with myself. I took notes throughout the presentation with our clients at Marek Health. I'm sure everyone learned a lot. I want to thank everyone for joining this webinar too. It's so cool to see so many of you actively learning, participating, and taking control of your health. If you guys want to learn more, I strongly encourage you guys to check out Stan Efferding. You can find him on his website, stanefferding.com. There you'll find his book, The Vertical Diet. It's something that we recommend highly at Marek Health. If you guys want to delve deeper into this research, you can check out his book. We have a code for you, Stan's kindly offered. Use discount code MAREK, M-A-R-E-K, for 20% off. And then also, if you don't already, please check him out on social media. He's a wealth of information. You can find him on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, at Stan Efferding. Thank you, Stan.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for participating.